All right, welcome you all. So today we are going to talk about how to checkmate with two rooks, how to checkmate with a queen and a king by themselves, and also we are going to talk about how to checkmate with a single rook. This video is for the people who have just started playing chess, who knows or basically who know how to move the rook or who know how to move the queen, and also in between the beginner and the intermediate level. So let's start with something fresh, something new. But before that, for the ones who do not know how to move the pieces, let me give you a quick short recap with regards to this. This piece is known as the rook, correct? And how does the rook move? The rook moves up, the rook comes down, the rook moves towards the left, as well as the rook moves towards the right. So it's basically vertically and horizontally. And if you want it in a more mathematical way, it moves like the symbol of addition, which means it moves like a plus, up and down, left and right. I love it, right? For example, if I want to move my rook to g7, the answer is no, it cannot go directly over there in one move. But if I want to move the rook to g7, I might have to take alternate paths. For example, let's say if I want to move the rook to g7 in two moves, the rook should first go to g4 like this, and then probably it should move all the way to g7. Alternative path would be to move the rook to d7 and then go to g7, right? So all of this makes a lot of sense. So basically in all, yes, the rook does not travel diagonally. The rook moves up and down, left and right. So basically vertically and horizontally. Next comes the queen. If you all may know, the queen is the most powerful piece in the game of chess. Why? Because of two reasons, or probably three or four. I'm going to explain each and every one to all of you all who are watching the video. Firstly, the queen moves up and down, left and right, which means it inherits the power of the rook. Right? It inherits the power of the rook. It moves like the rook, up and down, left and right. All in all, not only does she inherit the power of the rook, but she also inherits the power of the bishop. A bishop is something which can travel diagonally, or moreover like the letter X. So not only the move G1 makes sense, but all of the squares along this diagonal, the letter X, how the bishop moves, makes a lot of sense. As well as the queen moves like the rook, like I said. So basically the queen controls pretty much everything when it's towards the center, which makes the queen the most powerful piece. And also the fourth reason the queen is powerful is because it has its own bad sides. Basically, if you lose the queen early, you lose the game. So basically, the queen is powerful because it inherits the power of the rook. Second reason is it inherits the power of the bishop. The third reason, combining both, it controls a lot of squares. Fourth reason is the queen's the most powerful piece because of the third. Fifth reason, if you lose the queen, you lose the game. So all of these things makes the queen the most powerful piece in the game of chess. And probably you should love the queen. You should always make sure you protect the queen, one reason or the other. And yes, sacrificing the queen is something that we will talk about in our next chapters. Now let's talk about this position, right? I love this position, and probably let me just like kind of, yeah, I think everything is perfect. So let's get back to our original position so that we can discuss more. So the agenda or the topic for today is how to checkmate with two rooks, how to checkmate with a king and a single queen with no pieces whatsoever. And then comes the third and the most important thing, which many kids, even adults that I've been teaching, are confused about, is how to checkmate with a single king and a single rook. So let's go forward, let's try to go ahead with it, and let's try to understand the geography, the history, and the ideology behind how to get the king with two rooks. Firstly, you need to understand where the king is. The king's placement, the opposition king's placement. When I say the opposition, it means the king that we are trying to checkmate, right? Is on which square? Let's locate the square. It's on the F file, it's on the third rank, which makes the king on the F file on the third rank, which means the king is on F3. So let's try to understand how do we checkmate the king with two rooks vertically. First of all, if the king has to be checkmated, it needs to be on either of the edges, which means it either needs to be on the 8th rank, on the H file, on the A file, or on the or on the first file and on the first rank or on the A file, correct? So let's go vertically up. Let's try to get the king towards the 8th rank, right? So now let's take a look at the king. The king is on the third rank, which means the rook on the second rank cuts off the king from moving towards down below. So now we understand one thing, that this rook controls the second rank. How do we control the third rank and also make sure we avoid the king from moving or coming down below? So the first move that white needs to play is to move the rook. You need to control the third rank without or with the fact making sure that the king controls the second. The first move that you need to play is moving your rook to b3. Right. Now you need to answer a little bit of questions. Can the king go or move towards the second? The answer is an absolute no. The king cannot move towards the second. Right. The king cannot move towards the second, which means it needs to go towards the fourth. Let's go a little bit back. Now the king was on the third. We need to push all the way towards the eighth. So we have made some progress. The king from the third has gone towards the fourth. Now the rook on b3 controls the third. So how do you control the fourth? Pretty easy, easy peasy lemon squeezy. Now you just push the king to the fifth by moving your rook to the fourth. Right, so just slide it, and we call this as a ladder mate. Why do we call this as a ladder mate? Because whenever we climb a ladder or whenever we climb steps, we always like put our left foot first, right foot next, left, right, or the other way around, vice versa. Right and left, right and left, right and left, and we keep on going ahead. Right, now again, we have to slowly and steadily progress towards our goal, which is to take and move our king forward. Not our king, when I mean our king is their king, right? So all the way from third, we have eventually made some progress. We have pushed the king all the way towards the fifth. So now everybody in the chat or probably in the comments, how do you control the fourth and make sure that you also control the fifth, pushing the king towards the sixth? And the answer is pretty simple. You do not need to move this rook. You need to move the other rook. Slide the other rook all the way vertically up, which is to push the rook towards the fifth, and then the king goes towards the sixth. Now comes a major thing that all of y'all need to understand, and all of y'all need to make sure about this is, right now your goal is to push the king towards the eighth, but if you control the sixth, The problem over here is you can control the sixth, but the problem is the king is too close towards the rook on b5. So the thing is, even if you push the rook towards a6, it would not make any sense and you would end up losing material because the rook on b5 would get captured. So in order to maintain control and maintain mobility on the fifth rank, all you need to do is make sure that the rook controls the fifth rank and push it as far away as you may from the king on c6. So you go you just slide back. It is just a rough patch for now, but yes, you're still controlling the fifth. You're not given up on the fifth rank and you're still doing all of it. So pretty much all of this makes sense. And then the king goes towards the sixth rank and moves. It's still making progress. King on b6, avoiding rook to b6. Now many of the adults make this misunderstanding of going towards rook h4, which is also a very abnormal move. So whenever you climb ladders, whenever you climb steps, whenever you climb something up and over, you need to make sure that the coordination is intact. So yep, the rook cannot go to h4, because if the rook goes to h4, then how will they go left and right and left and right? So you need to make sure there's some space in between. So instead of going or moving your rook to h4, you move your rook to g4, and then it is very simple. As I have told you, just push back and forth. It's just like climbing the ladder. Rook goes to h7, king goes to e8, and finally this leads to a checkmate, because there is nothing which can block, because black has no pieces left, and this is what we call a ladder mate. So a quick recap: if we want to move or push the king all the way up vertically as we desire, firstly, take a look at the king's position. It's controlling the third. We need to push it all the way towards the eighth. So the first move, yes, control the third rank. The second move, control the fourth rank. The third, probably the whatever move it is, control the fifth rank. And then you need to be an extra cautious example of what you need to do next. Yes, you cannot push and let the king go beside, because yes, the king can capture. So take your rook as far as away as you may, and then even right now you cannot push the rook to a6. Push the rook as far as you may, and then control and do whatever you want to. And then once the king is on the 8th rank, and once you have found a safe haven, then this would lead to an eventual checkmate. Very nice, so far so good. So practice this much as you may. I would definitely suggest you all to go to Lichess, because this is one of the most open-ended websites which is available. You can set up any positions as to may which are required, and you can go forward with it, right? So a little bit kickback on our next thing that we need to study is, how does the queen move? The queen moves diagonally, correct? The queen moves diagonally, which means the queen moves like the bishop. Absolutely correct. Not only does the queen move like the bishop, but the queen also moves like the rook, which makes it even rather powerful. So checkmating with the queen should be an easy job, only and only if you know the trick. Now let's try to understand the geography. I use the word geography time and again, because the coordinates are nothing but a geography. If you're young, you might not understand what I'm trying to say, but what coordinates do mean is, coordinates are squares or a particular area on the chessboard, right? So let's try to make sense of it. Firstly, let's try to understand the king's position. The king is on the e4 square, and where is the queen? The queen is behind the king. So if you're new or if you're an intermediate player, you always need to maintain the queen behind the king. And the second thing is you always need to maintain the queen at a knight's distance away from the king. So my second question being, is the queen at a knight's distance away from the king? No. So move it at a knight's distance away from the king. Is this at a knight's distance away from the king? No. The queen on b3 is not at a knight's distance away from the king. So you need to just reduce the scope, right? You have right now managed to reduce the scope, or you need to reduce the area. Firstly, this was the area that the queen kind of undermines or controls. But when you go over here, you have reduced the area. Let's say the king goes over here. Let's try to reduce the area, right? Put the queen at a knight's distance away from the king. Of course, all the way from down below over here, you have managed to reduce the area over there. Now again, let's try to reduce the area by maintaining the queen at a knight's distance away. So this is simple, queen e4. Again, now you might say, okay, now here's when most of the kids or most of the adults are like, you know what, coach, what do I need to do next? The queen is already at a knight's distance away. No, but the knight can move multiple squares and you can always go above and beyond so that the queen reduces the scope, and it also makes sure that it is at a nice distance away. So when you move your queen to d5, is the queen at a nice distance away? Yes. Have you reduced the scope? Yes. You went from the 4th rank and you controlled the 5th rank. Now can you reduce the scope? Yes. Knight's distance away. Now can you reduce the scope? Yes. From the 6th to the 7th, so you need to control the 6th. Yes. Now can you reduce the scope? Yes. Now can you reduce the scope? Yes, you can, but there is a thing called stalemate. So if you play a move like Queen f7, and if it's black's turn, can the black king go anywhere? No, the black king cannot move nowhere because it's black's turn and white has controlled all of them squares, so it does not make any sense. So once you know that the king has to shuffle and duffle between one of the two squares, now the queen's job is done for now. So now you just need to like kind of bring your king, right? It's just like the king's walk. Probably we will discuss more on that in our future sessions. But yes, you cannot checkmate the king solely with the help of the queen. You need to find other pieces. And now, how is it a checkmate? All of you all leave in the comments. Yes, it is a checkmate if you place your queen on e8, because it's game over. Bing bang, see that red dot? That means it's game over. Or else you can put your queen to g7 and it's also game over. So basically the entire methodology is to reduce the scope, right? Slowly and steadily reduce the scope. Reduce the scope. Keep on reducing the scope as much as you may. Reduce the scope. Reduce the scope. Keep on reducing the scope and make sure it's not a stalemate. If you all do not know what a stalemate is, kindly Google it up or probably take a look at something that I'll be posting shortly later, right? Stalemate is something, but I'll again make you understand. A stalemate is something when it's black to play. For example, white played the move queen f7 and it's black turn to play. Does black have any legit squares to go? No. Black cannot make any move when it's black's turn to play, which is a stalemate. So yes, you do not push your queen at a nice distance. You only do that to a certain limit, right? And then you start moving, nah, not the queen, but the king. And then you go all the way up, all the way up. Queen e8 is a beautiful move, and also queen g7 would lead to one of the best checkmates. And now comes our final chapter. Before that, please leave some likes Please leave some subscribes. Please leave some comments. And let's go as to how we may checkmate the black king. If you're new to chess, then again, I would say this is the scope. How do we reduce the scope? By putting the rook on a square which is deemed safe for him. So let's go ahead, let's practice. I want you all to leave a comment. What is the first move that the white rook should or must play? Correct, just as the queen did. It's just about reducing the scope. So when it came to the queen, it was just leave the queen at a nice distance away and reduce the scope. That was as simple as that. But when it comes to the rook, there are two things that we need to observe. First of all, okay, reduce the scope. Yes, did we reduce the scope? Indeed, we did. Hmm. Now the king comes over here, right? The king is on the right hand side of the board. So we always have to make sure that the king stays towards the right hand side. For example, a move like this, rook e2, then the king would go to the left hand side. So we always have to make sure that the king stays towards the right. Can you reduce the scope with the rook? No, because if you go rook e2, the king will go to d3. So how do you reduce the scope? Okay, if you do not have an option to reduce the scope, simply move the king. Can you reduce the scope? Earlier the scope was like this. Earlier the control was like this. Now can you reduce the squares? Yes. Did you? Of course. Now can you reduce the squares? No, you cannot. Even if you go over here, probably there or like some confusion. Reduce the squares. Reduce the squares. Like keep on reducing the squares. Now can you reduce the square with your rook? Yes. Now can you reduce the square? No, because the king will capture it. So just go up. Now can you reduce the square? Yes. Right? So just keep on reducing the squares. If you cannot reduce the squares, move the king. If you can reduce the squares, move the rook. If you cannot, move the king again. Can you reduce the squares? Yes. Can you reduce the squares? Yes. And then the king is right over there. And then simply once you've got all of it, just make sure, can you reduce the square? No. So just go back, just make sure whatever it is, yeah, and the king should always come in front of the king in order to checkmate. The king will try to ditch, king will try to ditch, the king will try to ditch, the king will try to ditch, and finally when the king is in front of the king, it will result in a checkmate. This is what we call as an opposition. So I hope you guys liked and enjoyed the video. Do come over with some comments with regards to the rook and the king, but definitely what I would love to suggest, a quick recap would be just to reduce the scope, right? Just reduce the scope. Scope was here, reduce it. For example, over here, just reduce the scope. Keep on reducing the scope. The king goes over here, okay, reduce the scope. King goes over here, reduce the scope. Keep on reducing the scope. And once the king is on the edge of the board, all you need to do is make sure that the scope keeps on reducing, right? The scope keeps on reducing. The scope keeps on reducing. Just push, just make sure it's not a stalemate. Stalemate I've explained in the, like, go back 5 minutes and you'll understand what a stalemate is. Reduce the scope. Okay, reduce the scope. And okay, if the king comes over here, just go back because the king cannot come there, and then bang on. This is a checkmate. There are many ways to kind of decipher the position, but you also have to do your own homework. So for the last thing, the king and the rook, study it by yourself. Make sure you do some homework, make sure you kind of like have something in your mind to figure it out. But I kind of love teaching about chess. I love teaching all about it. As you can see on the right hand side, if you want to book a free demo, if you want to have something uh, wherein we can communicate with regards to chess, absolutely free for about 45 minutes to half an hour. You can go for it. Hope you learned something today, and I will be talking to you shortly in a day. Thank you so much and have fun. God bless. Take care. Sayonara. Lavia.